If you love unpacking the hidden wiring behind human behavior, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're going through a fascinating psychological explainer that breaks down a very specific and honestly kind of paradoxical human behavior. It's something nearly all of us have experienced at some point, yet very few of us actually understand why we do it. Okay, let's dive into this and explore a concept that might completely reframe how you look at the choices you make every single day. We're talking about the phenomenon known as the trap of familiar misery. So, why do we stay in situations we hate? I want you to really sit with that for a second. Have you ever found yourself just stuck in a dead-end job that completely drained your energy? Or maybe you've held on to a daily habit that you knew, objectively, was bringing you down. You wake up, you feel that dread of the disappointing routine ahead of you, and yet you just keep doing it, month after month, year after year. If you've been there, I want to validate that experience for you right now. It is incredibly common. But logically, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? I mean, if we hate a situation, our instinct should be to run in the absolute opposite direction. So why do we freeze? Why do we endure the disappointment instead of just reaching for something better? To really understand this, we need to look at a pretty stark contrast. On one side, we've got familiar misery. That's your disappointing but entirely known routine. You know exactly how annoying your boss is going to be or exactly how unfulfilling that bad habit is. But on the other side, we have unknown change, new, untested territory that holds the potential for immense joy, success, and relief. So here is the great mystery. Why in the world does the human brain consistently prefer the disappointing routine over the limitless potential of the unknown? Why on earth would we actively choose misery just because it's familiar? Well, that brings us to the formal definition from our source material. The trap of familiar misery is defined as the psychological phenomenon where one stays in a disappointing situation simply because the routine is known and expected. I want you to let the weight of that definition sink in for a minute. If you've been beating yourself up for not making a change, for, lacking willpower, or for feeling stuck, you really need to hear this. Your inaction is not a personal failure at all. It's actually a fundamental quirk of human wiring. You aren't staying because you're weak. You're staying because of how your mind evaluates the environment around you. Now, what's really interesting about this is that the surprising truth points us directly toward the unexpected culprit driving our choices. See, we like to think of ourselves as these highly rational creatures, constantly optimizing our lives for joy and satisfaction. We assume our brain's number one goal is just to make us happy, right? But as our source material reveals, that assumption is actually entirely backward. Your brain has a hidden priority that trumps almost everything else, and it's this exact priority that locks you into the trap of familiar misery. And this brilliantly illustrates what the brain actually values. We're looking at a massive 90% slice representing predictability and a comparatively tiny 10% slice for happiness. According to the concepts in our source material, our minds value knowing what comes next far, far more than they value actual joy. Just think about how profound that is. The brain is, at its core, an ancient survival machine. From an evolutionary standpoint, surprises in the wild usually meant danger. Therefore, a brain that knows exactly what's going to happen today is a brain that feels completely secure, even if what happens today is totally miserable. Happiness is kind of just a luxury. Predictability? That's survival. Let's see how this builds into your daily mental process. Here is the step-by-step internal logic your well-meaning but totally misguided brain uses to process your life. Step 1. You encounter a disappointing routine. Let's say it's a terrible morning commute to a job you really dislike. Step 2. Your brain scans the environment and recognizes, okay, I know exactly how bad traffic will be, and I know exactly what my frustrating boss is going to say. It recognizes the situation is completely predictable. Then, step 3. Because it is predictable, your brain immediately slaps a giant label on the situation that says safe. It doesn't matter that you're unhappy, the routine is known, and therefore, to your brain, it is safe. And because your brain operates on this deeply ingrained logic, we arrive at this terrifying equation. Change equals risk, period. If predictability is the ultimate safety, then literally any deviation from the routine is seen as a massive threat. This completely explains why taking a positive step forward, like applying for a new job, moving to a new city, or finally breaking that bad habit, sets off absolute internal alarm bells. Even if the change is objectively good for you, it disrupts that predictable environment. Your brain doesn't care that the new job pays better. It only cares that it doesn't know the new routine yet. And that makes the unknown change feel infinitely riskier than your current familiar misery. So the crucial point is captured in 3 simple words from our source material. Predictable feels safe. Take a second to really let that sink in. This is the root cause of why we stay in situations we hate. It's basically a trick of the mind. That feeling of safety you get from your daily routine, it isn't actual safety, it's just the absence of surprise. Your brain is essentially confusing the comfort of the known with what is actually best for your overall well-being. So, what does this all mean for us? What should you actually take away from this explainer? Well, we need to completely reframe how we view our lives. First off, you must realize that a disappointing routine is not true safety. It's a cage with an open door. Second, when you try to leave that cage, the fear you feel isn't some sign you're making a huge mistake. Change simply triggers false alarm bells in a brain that is literally obsessed with routine. And third, growth inherently requires stepping into the unknown. If you want a bigger slice of that happiness we discussed earlier, you've got to be willing to temporarily sacrifice predictability. You just have to learn to ignore those false alarms. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If predictable feels safe to the mind, what incredible opportunities, what immense joys, and what transformative experiences are you missing out on simply because you're avoiding the risk of change? It is time to challenge your brain's definition of safety. The trap of familiar misery only holds you as long as you let it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this empowers you to finally take that step into the unknown.